All right, today we'll be doing a live review of the Akashi White Oak Blended Japanese whiskey. Um, this is a actual Japanese whiskey from the Igashima Shuzo Distillery. It is a blended Japanese whiskey, though, so there is 70% grain whiskey and 30% UK malted barley in here, so it's a mix of grain whiskey and malt whiskey. It's also lightly peated, apparently. I'm not sure I got much peat out of this last time we tried it. I have no idea what the ppm is, but apparently it's lightly peated. It is 40% ABV, 80 proof, chill filtered and color added, of course. And my understanding is this is aged for 3 years in ex-Wild Turkey bourbon barrels, and then finished for 2 years in ex-sherry of some kind, which I'm assuming is Oloroso. And apparently the one thing about this distillery is they use very, very, very small pot stills. So I don't know exactly the size or the kind of nature of these like mini pot stills, but I have something in my notes that says they have very small pot stills. So that's interesting to note. That's pretty much the only thing about this guy that I got for you. We're going to pour it a little bit, let it rest, and I think there's actually a blurb in our book about this distillery. Even though it's like there's not a lot of offerings from this distillery, there is a single malt, and there's a couple like different cast, 5-year-old different cast ones. I think they're all about 5 years old. And there is one that has got a like a black or like a dark gray charcoal kind of label that's very similar to this. That is actually not Japanese whiskey. It's got some scotch in it or something. So just to be clear, but this one is in fact Japanese whiskey. It's a mix of grain and malt Japanese whiskeys. As far as my understanding, that could be that could be wrong. If somebody in the if somebody in the stratosphere knows better than me, let me know. But as far as I know, this one is actually Japanese whiskey, and it is a little screw cap here, so there's no kind of pop I can give you. Um, and we will rate this 25 points for aroma, 25 points for palate, 25 points for finish, 10 for texture, and 15 for my personal experience. I'm hoping this cap is actually good enough that this is not like oxidated to fuck, but it doesn't look oxidated. Although there is like some particles in this bottle, and I think it's because at one point I tried to like seal it with a cork, and the cork got like stuck in there, and then I had to corkscrew the cork out. So there might be some cork going on in there, but that's not the biggest deal at the end of the day. All right. Yeah, we got Adria all over our turntable. All right, so while that rests for just a minute, I'm pretty sure when I was in this book last, I did see a little bit of a blurb about this particular distillery, which it's not a very big distillery, so a little surprising that there is much of anything in here. Let's see if we can find it. They changed the name of this one multiple times, so that makes it a little complicated. I think they used to call it like it says White Oak on this. I think at one point it was the White Oak Distillery, and at one point it was like the Akashi Distillery or something like that. And now it's called the Igashima Distillery. It's all the same distillery, but they keep like I don't know, like changing the name or something. 242. See if we get something about it. A little bit of something. So it says founded in 1984. Located on the coast in Akashi City in Hyogo Prefecture, this distillery can trace its roots as a sake brewery back to the Edo period in the 17th and 18th century. It was granted a whiskey license in 1919, though until the modern era of production, it was last active in the whiskey world during the 1960s and 70s, just as the popularity of whiskey was soaring at home in Japan. Formerly known as the White Oak Distillery until 2019, the distillery upgraded its equipment to focus on its whiskey operations as Japanese whiskey found international favor during the 21st century, though this is still a tiny whiskey distillery by Japanese standards. It has a stainless steel semi-lauter tun, 4 stainless steel washbacks, and a pair of copper pot stills made by Miyake Industries with chunky shell and tube condensers. They maintain a Shubo-style yeast starter for their fermentation process, more through their familiarity with sake production than any other reason. They've been releasing single malt whiskeys since 2007. The distillery mostly matures their whiskeys in bourbon, sherry, wine, and brandy. Bottling appears under the White Oak brand, Akashi, and Igashima. Their premium line, though only those labeled single malt entirely originate from the Igashima distillery, as imported whiskey is still sourced for blending. So this says that only the ones labeled single malt are actually entirely Japanese whiskey, and this one does not say that. So, but my understanding is this particular one um, was grain. The reason it's called blend is because it's grain and malt whiskey, but I don't know. Maybe the malt is Scotch. It does say there's 70% grain whiskey in here, and then the rest is 30% grain whiskey or malt whiskey. But it was made with UK malted barley. I'm assuming probably lightly peated. It just says it's a lightly peated offering. So my guess, as far as I know, is this particular bottle is distilled in Japan, but this book would kind of indicate that it might not be distilled in Japan. It's always up in the air with this stuff, but my understanding is that this was distilled in Japan from UK barley. So I don't know. My best information is that it is distilled in Japan and that the black label one is not. But um, I'm willing to be completely wrong about that. It is a wild world out there when it comes to this stuff. Put some music on there real quick. All right, so this is dyed though. This is colored. Um, Again, this is only 5 years old. It's 3 years ex bourbon. I did somehow manage to dig up the information that the bourbon barrels they're using are from Wild Turkey. Um, it was kind of like in an oddball news article, so maybe not 100% true, but it seemed like it was true. And the ex sherry is who knows. And of course, it's 4% ABV. Don't expect too whole heck of a lot. It'll probably be quite clean. Although it says lightly peated, so who knows what the ppm is exactly. Last time I tried this, I didn't get like much smoke on it at all. But I think I watched somebody else talk about this particular bottle, and they said it was like kind of almost like cigarette smoke kind of tier smoke. So we'll see how it feels today. Kind of a little on the fruity side. It's a little malty. I say a little. It's a lot malty. Yeah, it's quite malty. A little bit grainy. Get a bit of that grain whiskey kind of graininess in it. It's not very old, so this is probably to be expected. There was like I don't know if I would detect this smoke if I wasn't suggested that this was lightly peated, but it feels like there is a very light smoke, like a very, very thin veil. And I don't hate the descriptor of like faint cigarette smoke. Actually, is not a bad way to put it. Like it's probably less smoky than Johnny Black, for reference. Which, of course, we know Johnny Black is smoked with Colila as part of the blend, but it's not. It's not very smoky. So this is like way down there on the smoke. Although, like, I'm actually really surprised at how much this like faint cigarette smoke odor kind of like resonates. That note like resonates really well actually with his nose. It's like somebody smoked indoors like an hour ago and you walked into the room. That's kind of like what it's like. There is a little bit of like a fruity character that I would associate with sherry, a sherry cask. Like a really dry fruit, but not like very raisiny. It's maybe like a shriveled up plum or something. That's like the best way I can put it. And these are all enveloped in this kind of like light um, cigarette smoke. It's kind of odd, actually. It's kind of odd. It's an odd whiskey. It's young. It's grainy. There is an odd layer of smoke about it. Very faint, odd layer of smoke about it. And there is like a sherry influence. But it's almost like sometimes with like very peated Isla's, it's like you get all these smoky notes, all these smoky characters, and you're like fighting through the peat notes to find the like other notes. And right now, I feel like it's like I'm doing that with malt. I feel like the malt and grainy notes are like what I'm fighting through to get other stuff. There's some like stuff in this that I can't quite hit. It's weird. It's a weird. It's funky. It's kind of a little funky, but not like in a funk kind of way. But it's like just kind of odd. It's a very odd. And I think it's just a combination. Again, it's a combination of factors that I'm not used to. It's it's way younger. It's got a light smoky aspect. There's grain in here. All right, we're gonna try this on the palate. Cheers. Hmm. Okay, it's a little different. Um, that's different. Ooh, that's bitter. Ooh, the back of that is so bitter. Um, this is kind of a different adventure. This is definitely a flavor experience. That much I like about it. I don't know that it's a positive flavor experience, but it's a flavor experience. It is very malty. It's very grainy too. Um, right at first, right on the entry, it's all that like malty character, grainy character, very grainy, and then kind of like around the mid palate, you get some like a dry apple juice kind of thing come out, and then the longer you hold it, you have this growing like ashy cigarettes smoke character that starts to rise and become very bitter. Um, and then as you swallow, it's the same kind of thing. It's kind of like malty with a little bit of like this fruity note, and then it gives rise to this like very bitter, ashy smoke kind of character that like finishes out like in a weird, very bitter, kind of almost borderline metallic taste, which I've never experienced anything quite like that. It's different, but maybe not positive, but it's wild. There's something wild going on with this. I wouldn't call it a wild positive experience, but it's interesting. Finish not terribly long. We'll say short plus right now. We'll give it short plus right on the get go. Why is this not auto playing? Why is autoplay off? Don't do that. Wow, it's kind of interesting. It definitely does feel lightly peated, but not like in the like, hey, there's a subtle waft of nice smoke around. It's kind of like peated in the most weird way. It's like they took the like really ashy part of Lagavulin and mixed it with like a really bitter note. Um, but it's not like earthy bitter. Like it's not like that. It's like a metallic bitter. But you know it's like smoke related. You can tell it's smoke related. It's like you licked the metal ashtray or something like that. Um, that's kind of like what it feels like. But I'm somewhat enjoying this because it's like something like a little wild, but a little different. Uh, man, that's weird. But I'm not sure I could recommend this flavor profile. Oh, what is that? There's like a slight lactic character. Oh, what is that? That's kind of odd. It's developed some kind of odd. I think it's just the grain being weird. I wonder what grains are actually in here. I couldn't find out what the mash bill is with the grain whiskey. There is something like there's actually something that's like legitimately a little funky about it. I don't know what you would call it. I'm gonna say like really really dried out smoked old cheddar. Something a little funky. It's like a smoky, lactic, kind of old, cheesy note. Very dry note. It's a little bit offensive on the nostrils in terms of ethanol for the proof too, and that's just because it's young though. It's a younger one. That like dried plum or something that's in there is very distant. It's really hard to pick out. And that's something. Can't even say the finish is clean. It's not. It's got a weird smoke related bitter metallic aftertaste. It won't be clear to call this an aftertaste, not a finish. It's got to be grain whiskey related. I think it's like it's weird because I think the malted barley is what would be smoked, but it's like that smoke. It's almost like it feels like the grain whiskey is smoked and it's giving like a weird aftertaste. But I think it's just those two things like fusing together somehow. Length is not very long. Short plus is fine. It's a little simplistic. The profile is a little challenging. Yeah, that's something. I'm gonna try to give it all the time that it's worth. There is a growing sweetness about it, though. There is a growing kind of like simple syrup sort of sweetness growing into it. It's just so, I think it's just a little young. It's a little young. It's very on the like malty, grainy side. It may be a very short fermentation too. I don't know. I think like it's just not that fruity ultimately. Like I imagine it's a very short fermentation and just it's a little young, like a mix of those two things are causing it to be very malty, very grainy. Oh, that's a weird. What was that weird? It's like a black pepper thing. Black pepper on an omelet, frankly. There's some kind of funky note in there, like some kind of weird note. And I first it like kind of felt like this smoky dry old cheddar, and now it's kind of presented kind of like like an omelet with black pepper on it. It's like yeah. And not like cracked black pepper, like pepper out of the pepper shaker on an omelet. A funky adventure. This is a bit of a funky adventure. Again, I don't know. I could recommend this flavor profile though. It is a wonky flavor profile. Trying to give it some time to like the weird part is the set of aromas coming out of the nose is actually not bad. It just, how would you describe it? It's like the complexity of the nose is actually not that bad, but the actual aromas it's producing is like not good. uh, it's not a terribly appetizing set of notes, but it's a set of notes. Huh. And it is a little fiery too. Like that's one of the unfortunate parts is it's 80 proof and it's acting very hot on the nose. Oh, that bitter smoke note is challenging. Oh, that bitter note is challenging. This is a bit of an interesting it's a bit of an interesting whiskey to talk about because in one side we have to rate this in a way. And normally I rate things like, maybe if the flavor's not for me, okay. But, we rate it on like the flavors, intensity, and complexity. But this one, the flavor is debatably not good. It is subjectively does not taste good. So it's hard, and even the nose is not particularly like. It's interesting, but that's the word I would use. I would use the word interesting, not good. I wouldn't come across this and be like, "Oh man, this is like a lovely bouquet of something." It's like very strange, and I don't know if I want to like call them off notes, but it feels off. So I have to decide if I want to like say, hey, these notes are not for me, but they're in there, and we'll rate those as if they, could be for somebody. Or we look at this and be like, hey, this does not taste good. I do not recommend. Because I'm very much in the this does not taste good, would not recommend camp right now. Despite there being weird and funky wild things going. Hmm. Could somebody like this? It's very malty. Wow, very grainy. Okay. We'll talk about the nose for a second. Huh. Weird, funky, strange set of notes. Not bad intensity for 80 proof. It's not the worst nose. I'm not hunting really. I'm just getting very weird things. Nose is like kind of wild. Um, hmm. I think it's fair to give it a pretty good nose, despite the fact that the notes are funky and weird. Um, it's not super amazing, but let's give it a 15. I think the nose is reasonable enough for 15. All right, let's talk about the palate. Very grain forward, very malt forward. A little bit of like simple syrup sweetness hitting down the middle of it. Mid palate, you get like frankly, sort of juicy apple kind of character. I call it an apple juice, not like an apple fruit that's juicy, like an apple juice. Back palate, this kind of cigarette smoke into like bitter metallic cigarette smoke. Like licking metal ashtray. It's ashy too. We'll say licking metal ashtray or metal ashtray. We'll just give that as the note, metal ashtray. Oh, that's not pleasant. um, I can't give this a good score, if only because the palate is not pleasant. It is rough. This bitter metallic note is not great. That being said, it's like still giving like a reasonable amount of different things going on, but it's like a young multi-grainy character, some fruit, and then this like ashy metal ashtray thing. I think I'm gonna still give it a 13, frankly. I think this is gonna like eat shit in my experience. Like I'm gonna give it a terrible score in my experience. So if I give it an okay score up here, I guess it's not the worst. Because reasonably, realistically, there is some intensity of flavor going on. There is some complexity of flavor going on. There's a couple different things going on. It's just, not sure if it's for me, and not sure who it's for. Okay, let's talk about finish. It's definitely short. I have to decide like how terrible it is. Whisper of that apple, whisper of those grains and malt, cigarette smoke, ash, bitter metallic note. Um, Metal ashtray. Um, I think the like little like side edges of notes maybe are not enough to make it better than say 11. All right, let's talk about texture, which I think is thin. Worst part is I'm gonna have to like hold this in my mouth for a minute. Not the worst. Give it 3. All right. Let's talk about my personal experience with this whiskey. Um, it was a little funky, man. This was a funky ride. I don't remember it being this kind of wonky before. Maybe that air, maybe the air has played some part in this, in like revealing its true funk. Um, Weird funky nose with some weird notes. Um, very, very grainy and malty. Um, there's some fruit in there, but I mean, I get the feeling it's like a very short fermentation or something. Very malty, very grainy. Um, whatever, however, in whatever way this is peated, it does come across as like lingering tobacco smoke, like lingering, very specifically cigarette smoke. Um, there is an ashiness about it. The ashy note kind of goes bitter and then goes metallic, and it's really not a great. It's really not a great taste for me personally. I might associate it with like similar like metallic whiskeys, like cheap grain metallic whiskeys. It could be very similar, although I think in this instance it's coming more from the whatever when happened with the peat rather than the grain whiskey. But maybe it's those things getting together. I don't know. It's not a particularly pleasing flavor profile, and I think most people will find it challenging. Um, this is not forgettable because it's not the greatest taste, but I will relegate it to being a forgettable thing I would like to forget. Not great on the taste. Number 2. 2 out of 15 for my personal experience, man. Only because it'll get 2 because it was wild. There was wild things going on here. Funky, wild things going on. It won't get the worst score because the thing is despite it being like not to my taste, um, it does have like it's not doing nothing. It's not water. Like it's not like, hey, I'm basically drinking water here and there's nothing happening. There's something happening, and maybe it's for somebody. Um, but it's not for me. 44. 44 out of 100. Um, we call this an okay whiskey. It's okay. It's okay.